What's going on, guys, and welcome to another edition of the Warcry Podcast. I'm your host, Yahola Tiger, and on this edition, I have been teasing this episode for quite some time, but we're going to get into the 7th edition of This Is Creepy. A lot of these stories, pretty spooky, and we hit all different ranges of topics, from witches to astral projecting to, I think, little people's in here too. A lot of different things, but before we get to that, as always, Not Your Grandma's Quilting, located on Facebook. Type them up. Not Your Grandma's Quilting. Once again, they do a myriad of quilting services. Backing on, if you have a quilt that has no back on it, they'll help you out. If you need borders, they'll help you out. But there's a lot of different things, so go over there and check them out. There's things posted right now, rugs, quilts, and this is all homemade. I have a few things myself. Like I said, I keep telling you I'm going to show y'all some of the work, and I will soon. But Not Your Grandma's Quilting on Facebook, the Patreon, YouTube memberships, links will be below. You're going to get every episode early. So if I announce an episode that's coming out, it's already out. And I'll also say that in the post too. But Patreon, YouTube memberships, go check it out. And guys, you know what? Let's get to the show. It's very, very dangerous.
Get these spidey sense, I was like, oh, something's off.
And I'm just like, man, I'm waiting to hear something,
Keep that crowd warmed up. Is Mr. Yahola Tiger.
In 2018, I was 13 years old. And now this story is really scary and it's good for a campfire. Do not do this. I am stupid for messing with the stuff that I messed with. I remember laying on my back. I was falling asleep. I remember I was trying to control my dreams, like lucid dreaming. And also, you probably should never do that either. I was being dumb. The next thing you know, I feel like I'm being lifted out of my body into the air. Looking down at me, I see me. I'm floating in my room for a little bit, and then something grabbed the back of my neck, slams me into the wall. As it slammed me into the wall, I heard something say, "Get out." And I saw it, and it looked like a demon. I don't know what kind or what it was, but I saw it. It was a demon, like something out of a Conjuring film. I don't know if I can describe it to you, because to this day, thinking about it really scares me. But that's all I'm going to tell you. As soon as I saw it, it's like the spell was broken. I was pulled or slammed back into my physical body. This time it was like the movement of it freaked me out, and I jumped out of bed. And I literally ran so fast over the lamp and turned it on, and there was nothing there. So I grabbed my family's Bible out of the closet, and I said a prayer and read a few scriptures. Prayer literally through the entire night. I didn't get any sleep for the rest of that night, and it was a school night. Since then, I've never done that stuff. Of course, my parents have warned me to stay away from mediums, psychics, including dark medicine, witchcraft, because technically you don't know who or what they're talking to. And if you know what I mean, it's the other side. And I have stuck very close to my path and stayed away from that path. I call it the good path. This is my story. It was a scary one, and thank you for listening. There's something to be said when it comes to that astral projecting, I think is what they call it, or lucid dreaming. I have told on this podcast multiple times, I still have dreams that I think are real, or maybe an alternate universe. But here in the last, I don't know, I'd say year, 2 years, a lot about remote viewing and lucid dreaming and astral projection has come out. And we're finding out that the human brain is different. It is something that maybe we aren't quite understanding of. There was a documentary and an interview that I watched about kids with Down syndrome or nonverbal kids. And they can speak to each other telepathically. So there's a lot about the human brain that we really don't understand. And I don't ever understand about sleeping. I kind of laughed at myself growing up. I'm always like, Yeah, I can sleep when I'm dead. And then you think about it, when you're sleeping, you kind of are a little bit, I guess. It's a very interesting topic. And if you have any opinions on it, please let me know in the comments below or in um, some form or fashion if you want to send me an email or message me on one of the platforms. But I'd like to hear your opinion about this story and lucid dreams and what you think it could be. And now on to the next one. This story is out of Pawnee, Oklahoma. When I was a teenager, I went fishing with a couple of my cousins down by Catalet Bridge in Pawnee. If I'm saying that incorrectly, I apologize. There was an old swimming hole with a diving board that the city used to use back in the day. In that same area, there was a fishing pond just north of that old swimming hole, and that's where we used to go fish. My cousins were catching bass, but I wasn't having any luck, and I decided to walk down to the old swimming hole just south of that swimming hole is train tracks. I fished for a little bit, and I thought I heard my cousins walking along the train tracks. I could hear the rocks moving under their feet, and they were talking. And I ran to the tree line because I was going to jump out and scare them. As they got closer, I could hear them say, "I think he's down there." And the talking stopped, and I couldn't hear the rocks anymore. And I waited there for a little bit, and I stepped out of the tree line to look up at the train tracks, and I didn't see anyone there. I walked up to the hill to the train tracks, or by the train tracks, and looked for them, but they were gone. I grabbed my fishing gear and walked back to the ponds, and my cousins were still fishing. I asked them if they came looking for me, and they said no. They were fishing at the pond the entire time. Man, that's so creepy. Because that's what part of the stories, and I love when people send me those stories where we really don't know what it is. And that's why I kind of says might be LP. We talked a little bit after this, and he wasn't really quite sure. I was thinking maybe LP, but for them to be saying, "Oh, he's down there," kind of like they were going to sneak up on him, it's a little ominous. But I appreciate that story. When I was in college at NOC Tonkawa, I went to stay at my dad's house in Pawnee while he was gone. My dad lived in a small one-bedroom house by the donut shop. And when I got there, I started watching scary movies. The last movie I watched that night was The Exorcist. It was about 1 a.m. when I decided to go to sleep. My dad's one bedroom had two beds in the living room, and his bed was by the front door. I slept in the other bed on the other side of the room, and the layout of the house was a big living room / bedroom, kitchen, bathroom next to the kitchen, and then a basement. And I turned out all the lights and laid down. I think I was in bed for about 10 minutes when I heard someone running from the bathroom to the living room entrance and then run back to the bathroom. And I was frozen with fear. I couldn't get up. I couldn't open my eyes. Not that it would help, but it was pitch black in the home. I heard footsteps run from the bathroom and stopped right next to me, and it hit the bed hard enough for it to shake and then run back to the bathroom. I was beyond scared. Finally, I forced myself to get up. I turned on the lamp next to the bed and walked to the kitchen and turned the light on. I saw that the bathroom door was open, so I walked to the bathroom door, and there was nobody in there. I turned on the light, closed the door, and I blasted all the lights. My dad had this big radio system in the kitchen, and I turned the radio on real loud. I laid back down and eventually went back to sleep. When my dad came home, I told him what I experienced. My dad told me that he would sleep with the bathroom light on, and one night he heard a little kid talking in the bathroom. His bed sat next to the front door and was positioned where he could see into the kitchen and into the bathroom. He said the bathroom door creaked open and he saw a small child standing in the bathroom doorway. He said the child turned and closed the door. My dad said that he walked over to the bathroom, talking to the child as he opened the door, and when he looked inside the bathroom, there was no kid, no, not anyone, not a soul in the bathroom. there's something to it when it comes, about these little kids, people seeing these small children ghost or kid ghost or child ghost, whatever you're going to say. It reminds me of a story that a gentleman told me about his wife, and she worked at Cherokee Nation Hospital in Hastings, Tahlequah, and that people that were passing away would see this little boy, and he'd basically come in their room, talk, and then leave. And then he told me, which I need to update that, speaking of that, one of the nurses saw this little boy. And that's become a kind of common thing when I've talked to these nursing home people, hospital nurses, doctors. As I've asked them, I said, well, do you see a child? Or has anyone talked about seeing a child before they passed? And they were like, well, maybe. They always see someone that's a relative. Now and one of the people who was working in a nursing home in kind of Midtown Tulsa, they were telling me that a lot of people will see maybe a child version of a relative of theirs, which is interesting. I wonder if this is kind of crazy. I wonder if death is like nudging them, like, hey, it's probably time. But they come in like a child's, like a comforting way. I was very fascinated with that. This is my final story to you. One night I was driving around in Pawnee, and I wanted to get spooked out. So I drove around by my tribe, by the Pawnee facility, and found myself at Catlin Bridge. I didn't see anything, so I decided to go back home. And it was about midnight when I began to drive past the old Indian school for the Pawnee tribe. I looked over at the old boys' dorm, and I saw people walking out on the south side of this old boys' dorm building. So I stopped my truck, and I was kind of just sitting there watching, and I saw two white women wearing black, one in the front of the line and one in the back of the line. But both women were carrying lanterns, and they weren't very bright. There were about 7 native kids wearing white shirts walking in a single file line. The woman in the front stopped at the foot of the steps to the boys' dorm, and the leading child walked up to the door and opened it, and everyone else walked in. The ladies holding the lanterns walked into the dorm. I sat in my truck, stunned. I didn't feel scared, but more in awe. It was like I got to witness a historical event unfold in front of me. If you have had any experiences in the boys' dorm in Pawnee, you know that building is decrepit, holes in the floor, and it looks like that building is going to collapse at any moment. I do have a little bit of experience inside that boys' dorm. I was doing a storytelling event with Chris Hill and Russell Sun Eagle. Shout out Spirit Talkers. It's a podcast, but we did an event, and before the event started, I think it's on the Spirit Talkers TikTok page. But we're all hanging out, just kind of, mingling, and I think they were serving fry bread, good ways. No, and we was all hanging out, and Russell was standing kind of at the back, kind of like you're facing the playground. And he kind of was like, what is going on? And I'm going to tell you all this. There was no wind. It was not windy. It was just like a calm evening. And he gets a video of the merry-go-round spinning. And it's spinning. Like, it's not like it's just barely creaking. Like, if wind would have pushed it, it would have, like, been barely going. No, he got it was spinning. Like, there were kids on it. I'm getting goosebumps. I remember seeing the video. Go check it out. I may have to maybe share it or something on my story or something. But yeah, it's on the Spirit Talkers TikTok. But man, it was spinning. So I was like, man, he was showing the video, and I was like, that's crazy. And so we go through the event, we're telling stories, and then after the event, we start doing a little ghost hunting. I came out of retirement for those guys in that way. And it was just kind of crazy. You could feel it. The energy during the day was a lot different than the energy at night. And we're, walking around, and the veterans, the Pawnee Veterans Society or Association, those two guys, were kind of leading us through, giving us a little bit of backstory, talking about their people. It was really cool to kind of get a little insight on Pawnee people because they're up north, and so I don't in my kind of my purview, I don't really get to see a lot of that, and knowing Russell, getting a little bit of that, and then seeing his people, it's cool. I really enjoyed that. And we're getting backstories on kind of the Indian school, and that the guy that was the head honcho, white guy, was really doing some bad things to these native boys. And one thing I think that really kind of sent a chill down my spine is there's like a little opening or something in the ground. It's like a cellar. It used to be a cellar. It used to be where the house is, and we had our little ghost hunting devices. And I remember sitting there. God, there was one guy is all, hey, he was tore up, just sauced out, man. God, trying to go ghost hunting, sauced out. I don't know how he did it, but he did. But he was down there in the cellar, man. I could just feel it. I could feel that there was something in there. Like it was just like, it's almost like you kind of get you get instant anxiety when you run into something that maybe your senses are starting to kind of get hit by. So I'm halfway down these stairs, and we have this ghost app, and I can't remember the name of it. Everybody has it. I see people using it on TikTok all the time. And it kept saying, "Get out. You need to leave." And I'm like, "Nah, let's go." So I took out, and I told the dude, I was like, "Come on, let's go." He's like, "Oh no, ain't nothing down here." I'm like, "All right." So he's down there messing around and whatnot, and I'm like, "All right." And then Chris is standing right there, and he's hearing it saying, "Get out, get out." And I'm like, "Man, this is insane." And then we're kind of walking to where their college is, and the boys' dorm is kind of next to that. It's like in the same area. And we look up, and it looked like, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, maybe my eyes play tricks on me. But we're walking, and they're telling us, a little bit about the college and things that they got going on, and we see somebody walking upstairs in that college, and we all looked around thinking maybe it was somebody, and like I said, I can't remember if it was somebody or not, but now it's creepy. So one of the guys takes me down to the boys' dorm, and there's kind of a little way that you can get in. He was like, "Let me show you this way. I know we know how to get in here without going through the doors, whatnot." And it's all open, like it's decrepit. It's got holes all over the place. You can walk through. The building is about to go down, and we get down to the locker room, and there's one chair sitting in the middle of the room. Like literally there was all these kind of like where you could see where it was like used to be lockers, and right like it's smack dab in the middle of the dorms, there was one chair sitting like it was facing the way we came in. I'm getting goosebumps because, man, that's creepy. So, I got the ghost thing, and it was dead quiet on it. Like there was nothing. And I'm like, man, maybe this is something, maybe we need to get out of here. And so we kind of made our way out another way. But for that last story, it's just, man, it makes me so, I hate to say it like this, and I'm going to say it like this because it's just my, it's my podcast. I kind of say how I want to say it. But there's a level of anger that I can start feeling in my neck. And it's like and it goes into like my face. And I can feel it. It's like what do they say? The heat rising, temperatures picking up. What JR used to say, it's like a brawl in Muskogee, Oklahoma on a Friday night. It'd be like that. But knowing and seeing the different things that these Catholic preachers and these different, maybe Lutheran or Protestant, that this religious, these people that say that this is the right way and the way they treated people, that makes me so mad. It makes me angry. It makes me I don't know, man. It makes me want to learn how to time travel a little bit. You know, I don't know what I'm gonna do. I got to figure out how to shoot a flint pistol, I guess, or I don't know. It just makes me mad, man. It just makes me so angry. I hear these stories and him seeing that. That's history. That's history that he saw that night. And so I appreciate him sharing that because that's just a little glimpse of what it used to be like. Single file line. Cut your hair. You start losing your tongue. Not physically, but language. There's different things that even I saw when I was growing up, and it's very faint what I experienced than like what my grandparents experienced, and what even my dad experienced. It's a drop in the bucket. Because I've always been a very, I will not say, I mean, I don't know about aggressive, but maybe I've been a little brash, and I always tell people what I think, and like this is not how this is going to go, and it's gotten me in trouble, yeah, but one thing that I cannot stop is I'll never stop sharing my opinion on what I believe is right and what's wrong. And I think a lot of it nowadays is you can't talk about nobody. You can't talk about a certain set of people. And I see something going on in the Middle East right now, and I see what when I was reading different books, reading articles, and I see how, and even Buffalo Hunter Hunter, if you guys hadn't, heard, I'm going to do a review on the book on YouTube. I'll do a live stream, talk about it. But, man, that book made me mad too. Because it's just a slow and steady, basically just genocide, I guess is the word. I don't really like using that word. It's a buzzword. But, you start erasing people. And you got rid of in that book, you get rid of the buffalo, you get rid of the savage. And the coined phrase is, save the man, kill the Indian, or kill the savage. And that's I see that going on right now. Not in those specific terms, but I see that going on. There's a people who had a land for a long time, and people showed up wanting that land. So I see that. And I'm neither here or there on this topic, but the way that I'm seeing how it's seeing on my way, what I'm reading and seeing, it sounds a lot like that. But I appreciate him sharing these stories, and it's just it's heartbreaking. But it's amazing to him, and it's awe inspiring to keep going. So I appreciate him. This next experience and story comes out of Enid, Oklahoma. And this person came forward after I shared, or Hunters of the Paranormal shared his grandfather's alien abduction story. And I appreciate her coming forward and sharing her story. And it goes like this. It seems that I've always been fascinated by the mystical, magical, and the things of the like, knowing that there is more to life if we just look. When I was in 5th or 6th grade, my mom took me and my brothers out in the backyard one evening to watch the meteor shower. We lived in town, right off of Highway 412. The city lights probably kept us from being able to see too much in the sky, and I'm not sure how long we were actually out there. When my mom took my brothers in the house, I don't remember why. I don't think I was out there very long by myself, though. At some point, as I looked towards the east, there was a small strip mall about a block away in that direction, and I noticed a round, gray, non-shiny, metal-looking object moving from south to north. It had no lights, and it was silent. And it was low enough that I could see the streetlights lighting up the bottom of this round object as it moved. I watched it until it disappeared. It wasn't moving fast, and at some point, I felt a tremendous fear take over. and I ran into the house. And what's crazy is I don't remember what happened after that. And so basically, after that night, and up until about a year ago, I had nightmares of being abducted by gray aliens. Way before I actually had seen any of them anywhere else. Like, I just didn't know what they looked like, but I would see them. And after having children, I have 4, the nightmares slowed down, but the fear is still present, especially at night. About a year ago, I'm now in my 50s. I had another nightmare of a smaller gray alien coming down the hallway of the house that I currently live in, and I was angry. I was pissed. So I got out of bed and chased it, and it went down the hallway, and I was yelling and trying to get it out of the house as I was hitting it with everything I could get my hands on. They always felt like a real experience to me and not just nightmares. That is my UFO experience. I hope that if I ever see an ET again, they will be kind and not monsters like the monsters in my nightmares. When I talk about this, I can still feel the fear and emotions I had at that time. I wonder if those were the reasons why I had depression for the longest time, in which I don't suffer any longer. My spiritual life is amazing and has helped me understand and heal from fear, trauma, and depression. Thank you for letting me share my story. No one else has believed this happened to me. I appreciate you, and thank you for sharing all your stories. Well, I appreciate you sharing your story because I don't really hear a lot out of Oklahoma about these abductions and people dreaming about them, because it doesn't, maybe it's just people are scared that nobody will believe them. I believe in dreams. I believe that sometimes when we sleep, we're not us. We're something different. And I mentioned that before with the astral projection, story. But it's interesting, especially when it comes to the alien part of that. Sometimes trauma and stress can make your brain see things, do things, and you react different. It's just a whole lot with our brains that we don't really know. And I know that myth of, oh, we only use like 6% of our brain or whatever it is. I heard that's a myth. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it is very fascinating to hear these stories. And if you have another story like this lady in Enid, I don't want to give her name out, but if you have one of those stories, please shoot me an email, realwarcrypod@gmail.com. I'd love to hear it. And if you want to share your story publicly, I'd love to hear it. And one thing that I think keeps a lot of people from sharing the things that they see is the fact that they think people are going to make fun of them. And I'm going to be honest with you, I've heard some crazy stories. I've heard some insane stories. And I'm not going to lie to you, I'm okay with that because there is something going on there. So if you come over to the War Cry podcast and you want to tell your story, I believe you, because I've heard a lot of stories from a lot of people who continue to give the same details as this other person. There's a reason why, there's kind of a logic to why I do these This Is Creepy so far apart from each other. Because people will send me, it's weird how the universe or whatever works. I'll have like a couple people send me LP stories and they all have details that are the same. Or I'll have people send me Bigfoot stories and the details are the same. And I haven't publicly shared any of these stories. So it's fascinating. So if you got one, realwarcrypod@gmail.com, X, and TikTok, warcrypod. I just posted a video. What is this, Wednesday? There was I made a roll call of everybody. If you got a story on that video, put it in the comments. But or if you got a story and you want to share it here on Spotify, YouTube, share it in the comments. But I appreciate her sharing that story. And like I said, it does take courage to tell stories that you don't think people are going to believe you. But I believe you and I appreciate you. So I put out a little, I guess, announcement about nursing homes. And before I tell this story, I want another person to send me a nursing home story. If you work at a nursing home, or you work in the food department in a nursing home, go ahead and send me that story. I like to hear it. This one is close to home for me because it's just down the street. Didn't know it had some crazy stuff going on. So I was talking to this lady. She works the morning shift, and she was telling me that I kind of I'm always weird when I talk to people. I don't know if people think I'm spooky or what, but I say, you work at a nursing home, right? Oh, yeah, yeah. And they'll tell me kind of details about it. And then I'll say, is there got anything crazy going on over there? She's like, crazy. I'll say, yeah, you got any spooky things going on? She's like, well, I don't like to work the night shift. And I'm like, okay, there we go. Okay. Because a lot of times, as he said, people kind of sometimes are unsure of what they see. And she goes, I don't like working the night shift. And I said, why? She said, it is just weird. It's creepy. I see things that I don't know if it's real or not. And she goes, well, I'll tell you one story and I'll give you some background. And I said, okay, that sounds good. One night she was working and they just got somebody's like 100th birthday party or 90. There was a 90-year-old. She's like, they were old and they didn't look like they even was wanting to be there. Like they was like, man, it's time for me to go. It's cold blooded. But she said, man, that person was looking mad. Like they was like, man, I got to live on this earth another year. I'm sorry for if you are in a nursing home and you're listening to my podcast. I'm sorry, and I hope everything's good. But she was like, man, she was just mad. Like she just did not want to be there. And so they're wrapping up, and everybody's kind of being sent their ways and to their rooms. And as the night started to kind of progress, she looked down at the end of the hall, and she said that there's at night it's like shadows. You'll see like shadows going in and out of rooms. That's like a normal thing in nursing homes. What it's kind of gathering to me. And she said she would see shadows, and she thought it was weird. She was like, "Well, maybe it was just a reflection, or maybe my shadow from behind, but it looked like it was going from room to room." And she's walking down the hall, turns the corner, walking down the hall, and she thinks she sees something at the end of the hallway, and she's looking real hard, and it's a balloon that's floating kind of at the ceiling, like someone had maybe let go of the balloon and it's just making its way up. But she noticed that the balloon wasn't at the ceiling. The balloon was about halfway. So it was as if someone was holding the balloon at their shoulder length and the balloon was just floating. Like someone was holding onto the balloon, keeping it from hitting the ceiling. And it was moving closer. Like it was moving towards her. And one thing too, she was like not having it. She took off. She called security. She was like, there's someone in the building. I couldn't see him, but there's someone in the building. And they went back and the balloon was just as it was be normal. Like it was just, so they ran the footage back and you could see that the balloon or whatever was like halfway. Like it wasn't hitting the ceiling. But the weird thing about it is like they never saw the balloon go back. So she kind of thought she was seeing things. And I asked her, I said, well, how many people die in nursing homes? She goes, we have a lot. She's like, it's very sad. She's been working as a nurse at this place for a while, and she says it's really sad. But yeah, she's like, but that was the creepiest thing. And I told her I'm not working no night shifts. But I don't know if it's her sister, cousin, I can't remember exactly off the top of my head. But she was telling me that she works night shift, and she says she can hear talking in the hallways, and there's nobody in the hallway. Like she'll be walking, and she'll hear somebody talking, and she'll go in and check, and the nursing home patient is asleep. She was like, that's weird. So there's a lot of weird things. And so if you're a nursing home nurse, CNA, anybody, let me know. I'd like to hear your story because I get a few of them here and there. I was talking to somebody else who was working at one on Yale, and I asked her, I said, well, do you think that like it's based on the building? She's like, well, we have a lot of people die in ours, but I don't really see anything creepy, anything spooky. I said, how old is the facility? Oh, it's like 10 years old. I said, well, that might be it. Maybe not enough death in there. But yeah, if you're a nurse and you work in a nursing home or a hospital, the crazy part too is I was talking to a nurse that worked at St. Francis. And when they were in the old hospital, before all these new hospitals started kind of like making their way or like being built, they were in this old ER. And when all the patients were kind of in these old school rooms where, you just kind of fold the curtain, and they had like motion sensor lights, but every now and then they would be walking past and it looked like somebody was standing where the automatic light is, because like that hallway's supposed to be dark at night unless somebody's walking through there, or like they'll see the hallway lights start to like light up and then nobody comes out. So it's just that's at St. Francis here in Tulsa, the old hospital. I think it's 21st and whatever, not Harvard, Lewis maybe. But she said she would see, like they would be, just kind of at the middle desk checking, whatever paperwork, and they'd look over and it looked like somebody was walking like lighting up the hallway, and then nobody would come out, which is pretty creepy. But like I said, if you are somebody who has dealt with that, realwarcrypod@gmail.com. This next story, I was talking to a gentleman. Don't ask me how, but he works at Duck Creek Casino. Not saying I was over there, but I was talking to him. You know, he does different security jobs all over Tulsa, and he was telling me. I'm always, like I said, I like to get the spooky story, especially from the most random people, because they'll tell it. And he was telling. I said, what's the most scared you ever been during a security job? Maybe like roughing up some bikers, or no offense bikers, but y'all be kind of rowdy, drunk people. He said, "Nah, man, I'm not even afraid to tell you this story." I said, in my head, I was like, oh, this is gonna be a good one. He goes, "You know those towers out there by Victory Christian, over there by ORU?" And I can't remember the name of the tower, the towers or tower, whatever they. He said, "But I was working in the one that doesn't have anybody in it." And I just kind of got a call one day, and they said, "Hey, we need you to go down there and try to figure out the schedule, but we're going to send you down there for the night. Basically, all you got to do is walk the floors every 30 minutes, make your rounds." We've had some vandalism. We've had reports of people talking up there, or people up there messing around. He goes, "Okay, that's no problem." This guy's a big guy, real big guy. And I think he was like 6'6", 300 plus, probably almost closer to 4 bills. Big dude. And so he goes over there, no problem. He meets the guy that is supposed to be with him, and the guy kept saying, "Hey, why don't you go ahead and make rounds?" And he's like, "Well, you know this place better than me." He's like, "No, I need you to go make rounds, man. Go make rounds." So he's like, "All right, I'll go make rounds." He makes his way through the different rooms and floors, and as he gets up to like one of the higher floors, I can't remember if it was the top floor or it was like second to the top floor, but he was up there, and in his head, he's okay. There's been reports of people somehow sneaking their way through, and the guy below was watching the cameras. So he's walking and he's checking each room, just making his presence known. And he walks on down to the end of the hall, and he thinks he hears somebody, and he goes, "Hey, y'all need to evacuate the premises. This is private property." Doing the whole security guard thing. Nobody responds. So then he keeps hearing it again. He starts getting kind of spooked out. Starts getting a little bit scared. He's, "All right, y'all need to get on out of here." And he's like, I won't call the cops. I'll just escort y'all down, get y'all out of here. And nobody comes out. So he's like, whatever. So he turns his back and he's walking back towards the elevator. As he's stepping into the elevator, he goes to turn. And right as he's turning, he's face to face with this dark-headed woman. And her hair is kind of like the Ring, hair. And he's standing there face to face with this woman. He said, her face was not normal. But he said that literally he turned his back, and then he went to turn to press where he was going, and she was standing right there in his face. He said, "I did what every black guy does. I emergency closed the door." He was laughing, but he was so scared when he was in his face. So he goes down, and he gets down to the lower level, and he says, "I'm out of here. I'm not doing this job. I don't care. F this job." And the guy watching the cameras was like, "What's going on, man? Is there somebody up there?" He said, "Yeah, there's somebody up there. Somebody that's not in this world." And the guy looked at him, and when he arrived, he was wondering why that guy made him go up there. I think he thinks in hindsight that that's why that guy wouldn't go up there. That maybe he was basically calling in help to get someone else to go up there because he wasn't going up there because he knows something was up there. He said that was the scariest part up until I went home and I went to bed. In the middle of the night, he thought he could feel somebody like close to his face as he's laying down, and he opens his eyes and that woman was right there again. And he basically shook it off, and he looked and there was nobody there. He said that was the scariest part to me because it was in my home. I said, "Do you think it followed you home?" He said, "Being around you Indians." He said, "Yeah." He said, "Yeah, no doubt." He said it was like an unfinished encounter. He thinks because he just got out of there. And he said, I said, were you like you were scared? But he said, "Did you think it was trying to tell you something?" He said, "Man, I don't know, but I'll tell you what, I ain't going back to that building." This next story is about a Dogman encounter in Canada. I've been getting a lot of stories from this gentleman, and I appreciate him always doing that, finding time to do so. But this story was about his cousin, his family member who he was staying with. And so one night he was up real kind of late. Maybe not so late, but late enough if you're old, maybe 10 o'clock. His relative asked him to come over and say, hey, come hang out for a little while. So he's like, all right, I'll go over there. Now, he lives alone, so I was like, yeah, we'll just hang out, kind of. He says that I know that his home has something in it, but it never bothered him being alone there. So when I thought about it, he was always okay living alone. And so I went with him and got to his place. And he said that he was checking his notifications and seen something. He zoomed in, and behind a tree, there was a tall creature with the head of a dog. It was looking out from behind the tree. The legs were like the dog's. He said it was pretty tall. He was going to show me, but the hard drive was erased, so I didn't get to see it. But he told me that he almost took a picture with his phone, but he didn't think it would be erased. That would have been awesome to see. And that was good. And that's one thing, maybe too, that I was kind of thinking I need to ask this question to this gentleman. That maybe a shapeshifter, somebody, looking around at him. His house has already got some crazy stuff going on, different kind of spooky stuff. But I'm wondering if somebody was kind of, trying to see what he was doing, kind of looking at him, stalking him or something. People be like that. But I appreciate him sharing that story. And man, that's one thing too. I hope, I hope that he was able to maybe recover that. But also, there's another thing too. I've heard stories of people taking pictures of Bigfoot and then all of a sudden it's gone. I've heard the same with Dogman. I've also heard this about LP too. That things start going weird. If you guys remember in one of the original This Is Creepy stories, not episode stories, somebody had something like that happen with a cell phone that disappeared for a number of years. And then one day just showed up and it was everything was, the same. So those things do happen. But I appreciate him sharing that Dogman story of his cousin seeing this on the camera. I appreciate that story. And the next story is from Mr. Ryan Knights from Weird Maine Paranormal. He was so gracious to send in a story. So he had been filming, if you guys have known, Echoes, he has been filming a documentary about a paranormal investigation and the history behind it. And he was at this place that I guess that's called Springvale Rec. It's like a swimming, play area, picnic off of a river. It's a very safe place. Off to the beach is like a play area, and there's a trail that leads to a place called Indian's Last Leap, referred to as the Leap as well. There has been a lot of drownings at the Leap and the main beach, including 2 teen boys earlier in June of 2024 that had drowned. And so we went down there for the first time and did a reading on the beach. And something interesting came up that kind of gave me a pause on this investigation. I wanted to hit the Leap, but didn't make it that trip. So we go a second time and went right to the trail to go, to get a reading at the Leap. The 3 of us got there, and about 50 feet into the trail, everything went quiet. And we could hear something moving in the trees above us, but we couldn't see it. But it was really high up, and it moved to a position above us on the hilltop about 30 feet away. There was no growling or yelling or screaming, just whistling. The spirit box kept repeating, "Have respect," and "Get away." Then this thing comes out of the tree to ground level with a boom. It landed on all 4s, is what it sounded like. We ran out of there. The spirit box said safe as we put some distance between us and it. Now, he consulted a remote viewer who does the spirit world as well. And he believes that he's legit. And I've heard a lot of things about this guy, and it sounds like he is very legit. He said that the creature looked like Bigfoot, but its face was different. Its features were not of this world. He said that he believed it was Fae, or he says, as natives put it, LP. And so he was wanting to know if I have heard of any type of LP of this nature. Is there anything that he can do or that he can bring with him to ensure that they are safe. But he wanted to basically know these things. One thing about, I guess you could say LP, Fae, Fairy, whatever, however you want to describe these things. I think that LP and Fae are a little bit different in that sense. Um, but I don't think I've ever heard anything like that, saying that it had a different face. It might line up with Hunters of the Paranormal's grandfather's story about where he thinks Bigfoot, or where he was told that Bigfoot is actually from. And one thing I think that people always kind of lump together is LP with having like magical abilities, which, yes, that is. I have heard a lot of stories of them being able to bend time, or they have portals, or they use, medicinal things to have things happen. And I believe that they are maybe an interdimensional. I hate using that word, but they have powers beyond our comprehension, I'll say. I don't know if that's LP, which is very interesting. That this thing had a face that didn't look of this world. One thing about a lot of unaliving, I don't want to use the other word, but someone who unalives themselves. That is a lot of dark energy. I feel like is being released into a certain area. It's the same thing with like Merle Home Park, or drownings. That's a lot of whatever happened. It's a lot of energy, positive or negative, being released into a specific area. I believe that we're made up with energy. We're like big balls of energy. With this thing having this otherworldly face, that's very interesting. I wonder if that is maybe a demon that has grown so strong and it understands your fears. Because if you guys haven't heard Ryan's Bigfoot story, man, it's on Everything Bigfoot Part 2, along with Rod from Lodge Tales. That might be why he saw what he saw, because a lot of things can take shape, especially if you're dealing with certain spirits, demons, whatever, however you want to say it. Other dimensional beings, they feed off that power. They feed off that energy. And they know what you're scared of. And I think sometimes they can morph into what your fear is. And I'm thinking that's probably what he saw. Because it didn't quite look like a Bigfoot, but he is, in that story, he tells how scared he was of Bigfoot and seeing that thing. And to protect yourself, one thing too, I think people think that natives can give you something to cure everything for you. Like, oh, we give you this medicine bundle and here you are, you're protected from everything. But the thing is you have to believe in it. If you don't believe, or if you don't have faith, but if you don't believe in the medicine, it's not going to help you. You have to have a belief in it. Now, you can believe in multiple things. I always tell people just to believe, if you're a Christian, pray. Or if you're whatever religious backing and faith that you have, that is what's going to protect you, because you believe in it. Belief is the most powerful thing. Hope and belief are very powerful. If you have no hope, it's hard to exist in any environment, any type of situation, and having faith that the situation is going to be better. That's another thing. So that would be my advice for anyone, because I've been asked that question a few times. Well, what can do I make an offering to them? I said, depending on the entity. I'm sitting here in Oklahoma and this is in Maine. I don't know if that is LP. If you're offering up to a demonic force, you're just empowering the negative. So I don't know. Depending on if I was there and saw it, like, oh yeah, no, this is definitely LP. Or not saying I'm an expert, but I'm just saying there's certain signs that could be this. But we never know for sure. But I would probably say that it's probably a demonic force, something that's demon related, that has knowledge of your fears. Because the spirit box thing is a two-way street. You give some, it gives some. But I appreciate him sending in that story and asking those questions, because I do get that question. I did get it a lot there for a while, but hope that answers it for everybody. So this next story is a story out of Jay, Oklahoma. And I have only heard, barring my personal experiences with my family, I've only heard this maybe a couple times in my life. And this story is about a raven mocker. It's basically a Cherokee witch. A backstory on a raven mocker. It is someone who obviously practices certain medicines, and they want to be able to continue to extend their life is a characteristic. They will basically eat your heart to extend their life. So basically, it's like blood medicine. I've heard of them eating certain, mainly the heart, but I've seen different things said. I've always been told the heart. And before I tell the story out of Jay, I'll give you my story. Well, not really my story, but it's my family's story. When my grandma was passing away, I was a junior in high school. And there were a lot of weird things happening around her as she was passing away. There'd be some nights where my dad would be staying up with her and be at the house, and he's dozing off, and he could hear someone in there talking to her. He had a baby monitor that he was hearing this from, and he thought that was real weird. So he'd go in there and check on her. It's just her in there. My grandpa always used to tell us when we were little that he never called them raven mockers, but he called them witches. But raven mocker is what they're called. And he would tell us, he said, if anyone, when you have people pass, you make sure you always stay with them until you make sure that they go, to the Creator, and they go where they're gone. Their spirit has made that journey. And he would always say that you sit with them and you stay with them until that is done. And he'd always say that if you hear knocking, or if someone's trying to enter the home during this time, you don't let them in, because it could be a witch. It could be someone practicing that blood medicines. That's what I call it, because that's what it sounds like to me. But it could be that raven mocker. And my grandma, she was living out in the middle of nowhere. She had Bigfoot out there for sure at her house. And I've told those stories of feeling like something's watching you. One of these days I want to go out there and see if the people that live in that house now are experiencing anything. But that's maybe one day. And he always used to say, there's always somebody at the funeral who you don't recognize, or no one recognizes. They just are there. He said, that's a raven mocker. That's a witch trying to get that last bit of essence. And I was a young kid. I didn't understand. So I didn't really look for it. But I remember her funeral, and we're sitting there, and he was on high alert. I remember that. He was on high alert. He's looking around. Because my grandma, kind of, like I've said this a million times, had a hard life. And, she had my dad and my two uncles, and her life, took a turn, but she's always had a hard life. But my grandpa he always protected her. That was his promise to her, that he'd always do that. And I remember at the funeral, he's always real looking around, making sure nobody was, not supposed to be there. And as I got older, he was like, well, I'm going to tell you this story about the night, she passed and, or leading up to her passing. It's kind of crazy. I laugh about it a little bit, but it makes me sad. But her passing away at a very young age. They're sitting there, and all of a sudden they can hear something like it was wanting to get in the house. He says it always starts with a knock. He's knocking on that, knocking on that door. And my cousin, he said your cousin went and tried to open the door, and I had to yell at her. I had to be real mean to her. Don't open that door. And he said that it kind of bothered him the rest of the night until she passed. And that was one thing that I'd always stuck with me. I've told that story at a storytelling before, and I had some people, Cherokees in the audience who, they really enjoyed that story. I think I told it at the library. And so that story has always stuck in my brain, up until now. Because I haven't really heard a lot. I heard a Osage kind of witch story that I've told on this podcast. But I was talking to this lady, this woman who's we're the same age. I guess I don't call her old lady or nothing, but she was telling me a story. She says, I believe in them. And I kind of looked at her and said, well, believe in what? She said, I believe in them raven mockers. And my ears perked up, and I was like, okay. Well, do you have a story? She said, yeah. She had I think she had a relative who was passing. And I don't recall if she even went into that, but she just told me that they came around one night. I think somebody was passing away. She had just got done back from this is out of Jay, Oklahoma. She had just gotten back from a softball game. And she's out there, with the kids in the yard. All the kids are in the yard. And her grandpa comes out and says, y'all need to get in the house right now. She said it was like she could hear something coming. Like it was, wasn't like a bird or nothing, but she said you could hear something coming. Like it was like in their ears. And so they run in the house and they start kind of locking all the doors. And she said it was more than one coming after us. And she was so scared. She basically all night they were clawing on the door. They were knocking on the door. They wouldn't say nothing, but they were knocking on the door and they were scratching and they're really trying to get into the house. I'm getting goosebumps. This is that goosebumps. But they're trying to get in the house. Once the night was over, they go outside and they could see almost like it looked like claw marks. Like someone took, y'all know when those trees have the three prongs and it looked like somebody was slashing, and they go out to a tree that's kind of overlooking the house, and there were these deep claw marks going through the tree and on the house. And she says, I believe in them. I think that's what they were. They're coming after us. I think they were desperate. They needed life force, and maybe they were passing away and they were just nearby and needed something. Also kind of reminds me of vampires, but still. They're out there. And as I end this podcast with the 7th edition, they're still out there. I always talk about medicine in a certain way on this podcast because I'm not saying I'm very firm, with my stance on it. They're out there. They still practice. And I mean no disrespect, but at the same time, these are stories that are being lost. Not everybody knows these stories. And so with that being said, you guys can catch me on TikTok and X, Warcry Pod. The email is real, REAL, realwarcrypod @gmail.com. Not Your Grandma's Quilting, Patreon, YouTube memberships. Links will be in the description below. You want to get this episodes as soon as possible because I got some heat coming. But I appreciate everyone who supports the podcast. I'm going to catch you on the next one.